Welcome to the webinar series, Expert Talk on Survivor Engagement. In this 6-episode series, we explore the transformative potential of survivor engagement in anti-trafficking work. Each episode features an expert in the field alongside one of our project staff members. Together, they'll dive into key topics, providing insights, best practices, and inspiration for advancing meaningful survivor participation. Our discussion will cover a range of essential themes, including survivor-led advocacy, ethical storytelling, trauma-informed practices, and the role of lived experience in research and policymaking. Through these conversations, we aim to build a deeper understanding of how survivor engagement can drive systemic change and empower individuals and communities alike. In this episode, I'm glad to introduce and thanking Renos Papadopoulos, Professor and Director of the Center for Trauma, Asylum and Refugees, and of the Master Degree PhD programs in Refugee Care at the University of Essex, as well as Honorary Psychologist at the Tavistock Clinic. He is a clinical psychologist, Jungian psychoanalyst, and systemic family psychotherapist, both as a trainer and supervisor. As consultant, I want to add to the United Nations and many other organizations. He has been working with refugees, tortured persons, trafficked people, and other survivors of political violence and disasters in more than 40 countries. So today our topic will be, and we will speak about therapeutic complexity and how principle of resilience and trauma transformation can enhance survivor engagement practices. I'm Francesca Sguotti. I'm a clinical psychologist and a psychotherapist involved in voice-over project. As clinical referent for some action of the project, I'm glad to introduce Renos, and also the first question for him will be a sort of dialogue. And to start, I want to ask, from your long experience and the huge work with survivors, we want to explore in a few words, according to the complexity that we mentioned, your approach with the adversity grid.
Thank you, Francesca. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very pleased that I'm part of this incredibly worthy project. My approach of adversity grid, is referred to as adversity grid, is basically a framework. It's for us, when we approach the work from any perspective, to keep in mind a framework that reminds us of three important areas of our activities in this sphere. Let's be very clear. When we're working with victims of trafficking, with a lot of exploitation, with a lot of violence, with a lot of abuse, the adversity is tangible. We are working with people who have been severely damaged by, in a concrete way, from all of these forms of adversities. There are a lot of damages, there is a lot of pain, there is a lot of suffering, there is a lot of trauma. So there is no question about it that inevitably the way that we will look at these people and the way that we will direct our approach is to try to heal, to deal, to repair the damage. And that is nothing wrong. Of course, we need to do that. But by doing that, we forget that every human being, including, of course, all of these people, always also, in addition to their pain, they also retain some of their own strengths. As human beings, we always retain some strengths, not all of them. Some of them are lost. but always we retain some strengths, whatever these strengths may be. If we forget that, then we look at people in front of us more or less as damaged goods, as only damaged people. Yet human beings always retain their dignity in some way. They retain their strengths in terms of relating with other people and helping other people. So all of that tends to be forgotten. The adversity grid is a almost mental framework. It's a theoretical framework that reminds us, yes, look at the damages, look at the suffering, look at the trauma and everything, but don't forget that people always also retain some strengths. If we look at people only in terms of their damagedness, then in a sense, I mean, we don't need a PhD in psychology to know that if you relate to somebody in relation to one aspect of their being, you strengthen that part of their identity. So if we relate to these people exclusively from their damaged parts, we forget that they have some strengths. They forget that they have some strengths. Our programs forget that they have some strengths, and we basically infantilize them or victimize them, etc. And in that way, we are actually instill and strengthen the identity of being victims in them. And as we know, yes, people, these are very fine distinctions. People are victimized by events, but developing a victim identity is something different. If a person develops a victim identity, then they become passive, they become disenfranchised, they become more inappropriately dependent on other people, they lose their initiatives, they don't believe that they have anything that is worth in themselves, because after all, they're victims and they're damaged and they need other people's help and nothing else. So in a sense, we may damage them further by strengthening their victim identity if we focus exclusively on their damagedness and nothing else. But if we also remember that they retain some strengths, then we have an opportunity to look at them more holistically. And all of us want to work holistically. Holistically means to address as many aspects of that human being in front of us, and not only their damaged part. And of course, the adversity grid identifies even a third sphere, not only the damages and from the adversity, not only the retained strengths, but also it includes a third part, which is a third perspective, which is the new strengths that they developed as a result of being exposed to that adversity. This is what it is referred to as adversity activated development. Development that is energized, that is activated as a result of people being exposed to that adversity. In other words, the fact that they went through that adversity, the fact that they are still alive and they want to still improve, means that they learned a lot. They gained a lot. And that is often forgotten because, we want to help them, and we forget that actually they learned themselves a lot of new skills, new abilities as a result of being exposed to that adversity. if nothing else, if they were to think themselves, usually sometimes I ask them, if somebody told you, I don't know, 2 years before this happened, that you would have gone through all of these impossible forms of adversity, that you were trafficked, that you were abused, that you were all of these horrible things, would you have ever thought that you would have survived it? 19% of people say, I never thought that I had that strength to survive that, which means what? Now they realize that they have strength to have survived what they went through. And of course, much more. They learned a lot of things. They developed new skills. And all of that is forgotten. Because if we are there only to help them because they are the damaged ones and we are the experts, then we're not going to see what they have become experts of, that we haven't got a clue, because we didn't go through that situation. So the adversity grid helps us to look at people three-dimensionally, stereoscopically, not only as caricatures of trauma and nothing else. Helps us to see them, to attend to their difficulties that have been developed as a result of being exposed to those adversities. Look at also what strengths they have been able to retain, as well as adversity-activated development, what new strengths they were able to develop as a result of being exposed to that adversity. People tell me all the time, doctor, because I went so close to death, I lost everything. Now I look at life in a different way, and I want to live my life in a better way. Before I used to, I don't know, waste my time taking drugs and all of that. Now I want to go to university, do this, do that. That is adversity-activated development. That is positive development that would not have happened had the person not being exposed to adversity. Now, and here is the ethical issues, because we cannot say, isn't that wonderful that you went through all those things so that you are now have this adversity-activated development. We cannot do that. But that does not mean that the adversity-activated development is not there. So we need to sensitively attend to their losses, damages, pain, suffering, trauma, identify and help them collaborate with us to identify existing strengths that they had before they're exposed to adversity, as well as identify the new strengths that they develop because they were exposed to that adversity. This is the approach of the adversity grid, and it can be very, very useful for people to retain their dignity, and for us to, when we work with people, not to see them only as damaged people and nothing else.
It's very interesting what you're saying, because can change the point of view and can complex the topic instead of simplify, and also to give the agency of the survivors that we are working with is a very interesting and important approach. I was wondering also if how can the principles that you explain, we can say resilience and trauma, maybe transformation and a survivor engagement practices, we can put in practice in anti-trafficking support services.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
this is the focus,
Yes, yes. Well, in anti-trafficking situations, the obvious victimization is there, and there we need to work, in a sense, a little bit more vigorously to help them not to be locked as victims, because objectively they have been trafficked and they were abused and they were, so connecting with their agency and proper empowerment cannot be achieved only if we focus on their damages. Can only be achieved if they connect realistically with their other parts of themselves that they have not been damaged, but they have even been strengthened. And that's why by focusing on their retained strengths, which is my definition of resilience, I know that there are different definitions of resilience, but according to the original meaning of the term resilience is referring to the retained strengths of somebody even after they were exposed to damaging situations. What strengths a person has retained, that means that a person is resilient in relation to those aspects. So the focus on the strengths that they were able to retain, in other words, their resilient parts, their resilient features, helps them to understand that they are not only victims and damages. And the word victim, and I know it's a very big issue beyond this brief conversation, but objectively, these people have been victimized by the circumstances. We cannot deny that. Trafficking is victimizing people. What we need to work actively is to help them not identify with that victim identity, because we said by identifying as victims, then they lose their agency, they lose their, they become disempowered, they depend on others, and they feel basically that they are nothing. And by helping them to retain their own awareness that they cannot do this, they cannot do that, but they can help a little bit with this, or they can identify in themselves some strengths, that they can a sense of humor, that they can dance, that they can sing, that they can look after a person's baby for a little time. Just anything that they can do, that they realize that they are human beings and they can still do certain things. That is, in practical terms, how we can help people to remember that they are still human beings with a lot of value in themselves that they can still use for themselves and for others to move forward.
And also, according to your point of view, maybe how you can address the balance between the adversity, the acknowledging, okay, about the adversity, and highlighting the strengths, especially, I want to say, in the context of systemic and legal challenges, because as we know, we are inside of different systemic and we have to pass through this also.
Yeah. This is the difficulty, because I mean, these are additional difficulties. This field is very difficult. It's not easy. The various definitions of victims. I mean, in effect, people who have been trafficked are both victims as well as survivors. They have survived. So far, they have survived, and they are not dead. They have survived in a physical sense. And we need to help them realize that they have survived also psychologically and in terms of their own agency. But also they have been victimized. So it's not either the one or the other. And the difficulty is that in various social discourses, people follow various slogans or various theories, etc., and They see them either as survivors or as victims. They're both. They're both. But we're working in societies where there are systemic forms of violence, and we need to help as much as we can, and we need to help them to help themselves, because they cannot be always under certain agencies that are helping them. So we need to be expanding this adversity grid framework in order to understand the wider systemic forms of violence in society, and try in any worthy project to find ways to counteract that, because human beings can do a lot by themselves, but then if there are in situations where there is systemic violence in society, their chances are very limited. That's why this project and other projects are trying to address forms of violence beyond human beings, in terms of systemic structures, and try to improve and empower people in various other contexts. Yeah.
Yes, and I think also to how can I say, to move the position of power also, as you mentioned, no, in the beginning, according to give the expertise also to the people according to their, of course, vulnerabilities or fragility, I prefer, and also the other strengths, no, the retained strengths, the new strengths, and what they also create. If you can, I want to ask you the last question, if you can share a moment from your job that deeply shaped your understanding of this topic, in the sense that if you have some example or something according to your memories of the job that you can also share with us about this, your understanding.
There are so many.
Click.
Thank you, Frances. I mean, there are so many examples. I mean, where you see people who are so damaged, and so they suffered so much, and they have been treated so badly, and there are just sort of, you think that there is no strength. Earlier we are talking about both of us worked in Mexico and Guatemala border, and some children, they were coming there, and some of them were actually physically injured from attacks, and they had scars on them and all of that. And then, so in a sense, you hear their horror stories, and it's just unbelievable. You cannot believe that a child can survive all of these adversities. And then 2 seconds later, it's a child full of energy, and will give you a joke, and you will try to tease you, and then you realize, wow, there's a human being there, of course. And all of this, if we work with people, the more we work with people in these sort of situations, the more we see the complexity and the totality of all of these things. And always the danger is the balance between focusing on their strengths as well as attending to their damages. And it's both. If we do too much of this, we are victimizing. If we do too much of the other, we ignore disrespectfully, and we not respect their suffering. So that's why this work is very delicate, and it requires a lot of complexity. And it cannot be done by just simply legislating certain things. It requires therapeutic sensitivity of people, how and in what contexts we address different parts of their being. But we need to keep in mind these three dimensions in them. If we don't keep in mind there are three dimensions, we can easily be absorbed by the pain and the despair of the one side. And that is not going to be helpful to them. And it's not helpful for us. Yeah.
Of course, never forgetting from they come from. And also the last question, so we can go through the conclusion. If and how can maybe our organizations can adjust the support model to foster genuine empowerment for survivors, I can say, because this is our now main topic also, how we can enhance our job.
Well, the adversity grid framework reminds us of the three dimensions of human beings in these situations. And the empowerment comes from a harmonious way of addressing these three dimensions. If we focus only on the trauma side, then we forget their strengths. If we focus only on the strengths, we forget the trauma. And it's how our projects and our organizations keep in mind these three dimensions, and remember that we cannot address these three dimensions only according to project prescriptions. It always requires human sensitivity when to address which part. When somebody is completely broken and crying about everything, you don't say to them, oh, forget about that, cheer up, you still have strength. I mean, that is disrespectful. So the important thing is how to blend the three within a unique approach that attends to these three dimensions, so that parts of the project address this, predominantly the trauma, parts predominantly the existing strengths, part the new strengths, but in a way that can be used according to the human sensitivity at the time. That's why these projects are very difficult, because we can include these components, but how we implement them will never be possible without the human therapeutic sensitivity when to address each one of them.
So I think we need to work a little bit on this, and also to our approach. In general, I want to really thank you so much for this rich contribution, and also for joining us for this episode of the voiceover expert talks on survivor engagement. Really, your contribution is appreciated, and also for our colleagues and the people. We hope that discussion provided valuable insights and also practical approaches to advancing survivor engagement in our job, I can say, and also in the community. The project Voiceover is funded by the European Union, and whose support has made it possible for us to, I can say, amplify the voices of people who lived through experience and foster meaningful dialogue on this critical topic. I think we are going to stay connected with other experts and with us for future episodes, and we continue to explore ways to empower survivor leaders and promote ethical trauma-informed and impactful practices, and as we mentioned, to try to change and complex the things. I think it's time to thank you and to say see you next time.